Allocation and Apportionment. Hi and welcome to this Premier Training revision video, which will look at the techniques of allocation and apportionment, both of which are vital in absorption costing. You should be familiar with the idea that the cost of direct materials, direct labour and, occasionally, direct expenses together form the prime cost of a product. Direct costs are those which are incurred in making a product and which can be directly attributed to a particular unit of output. However, there are many other costs incurred by a business in manufacturing its products which cannot be directly associated with a specific unit of output, and these are called indirect costs or overheads. In absorption costing, these overheads must be shared out amongst the output so that the product's cost reflects the full cost of making it. The problem is finding a fair way to do this. Some overheads belong to a specific cost centre. For example, if a supervisor only works in the assembly department, then you would expect the assembly department to bear the full cost of his salary. Similarly, if it's possible to identify the exact amount of rent paid for a specific department, then that overhead cost can be allocated to that specific cost centre. This process is called allocation and is the first stage of the process. Any overhead costs which can be linked to a specific department or cost centre should be allocated to that cost centre to begin with. However, many overheads are incurred for the benefit of a number of different departments. For example, a factory may be made up of many departments or cost centres, and the cost of heating the factory benefits all of them. The next stage of the process, apportionment, deals with these shared overheads. The key is to find a way of sharing the overhead cost between the different departments in a way which is fair. This is usually done on the basis of respective sizes or activities of each cost centre. Here we have a list of typical overhead costs, and we need to find a way to apportion them fairly between departments. The first one, rent and rates, relates to property cost, and so the most appropriate method of apportioning the cost is on the basis of floor area. Heating and lighting is another cost which is closely related to area, or if the information is available, volume. This is because it presumably costs twice as much to heat an area which is twice the size of another. Similarly, buildings insurance can also be linked to floor space or volume, as indeed can buildings depreciation. We have seen so far that property-related overheads are most likely to be apportioned on the basis of floor area, but there are a number of other bases which are commonly used for other overheads. The expense of insurance for machinery is not linked to floor area, instead it's linked to the carrying value or net book value of the machinery. If Department A has machinery worth £10 million and Department B has machinery worth £3 million, then it's reasonable to expect that more of the total insurance expense for machinery is charged to Department A than Department B. Similarly, the expense of depreciation for machinery is also often linked to the carrying value or net book value of the machinery. Again, if Department A has machinery worth £10 million and Department B has machinery worth £3 million, then it's reasonable to expect that more of the total depreciation expense for the machinery is charged to Department A than Department B. Machinery depreciation could also, however, be apportioned on the basis of the usage of the machinery. If Department A's machines are used more than Department B's, again you would expect Department A to incur a bigger share of the depreciation expense. The costs of operating the staff canteen can be linked to the number of employees in each department, since it's the employees who will use the canteen. If Department A has twice as many employees as Department B, it's reasonable to assume they will use the canteen twice as much. Of course, this isn't always true. Maybe the staff in Department A bring more packed lunches and never use the canteen, but it's a reasonable approximation in the absence of any other information. Finally, the costs of supervision are most likely to be based on the number of hours the supervisors spend in each department, or perhaps the number of staff in each department they have to supervise. Whichever methods of apportionment are chosen, it's important to review and update them regularly, perhaps once a year. Remember, the whole purpose of apportionment is to split the overhead costs fairly between cost centres. If things change during the year which affect this, then the basis of apportionment should be reviewed and, if necessary, amended. Service areas are those which are not actually involved in the production of goods, but which nevertheless play an important role in supporting the production departments. Because these departments don't actually make products, any overheads which they incur must then be shared out amongst the production departments. If this didn't happen, some overhead costs would be left in service departments, and therefore they wouldn't be included in the cost of the product. Typical service departments include maintenance, stores, administration and canteen, and again the basis for reapportioning the costs of these to the production departments should reflect as fairly as possible the ways in which the services are used. To summarise then, we start with the total overhead cost. Where possible, overheads are first allocated directly to the departments which incurred them. For shared overheads which cannot be allocated, we apportion them on the most equitable or fair basis. We will then have a number of departments, each of which will have been allocated and apportioned overheads. These will include both production and non-production or service departments. Finally, we need to reapportion the service centre overheads to the production centres so that only production departments have any overhead costs attached to them. Let's look at an example. We are told there are 2 production departments and 2 service departments. We are also told that overheads have been allocated and apportioned to the 4 departments and given the totals as shown. We now need to reapportion the overhead costs of the service departments, stores and maintenance to the production departments as fairly as possible. Stores overheads are to be reapportioned on the basis of stores requisitions. There were 250 of these in total, with 150 raised by Department A, 50 by Department B and 50 by maintenance. Taking each department in turn, by dividing the number of their own stores requisitions by the total number of requisitions, we can calculate what share of the £2,400 stores overheads needs to be reapportioned to each of the remaining production or service centres. For example, Department A issued 150 requisitions. 150 divided by 250 total for stores requisitions multiplied by £2,400 gives us a figure of £1,440 to apportion to Department A. Carrying out this method for Department B and for maintenance gives us the following results. Now we can see that there are no longer any overhead costs charged to stores. Now we can reapportion the maintenance costs, this time on the basis of the value of the machinery. The total value of machinery is £30,000, with £20,000 in Department A and £10,000 in Department B. The maintenance department costs of £3,480 are therefore split in the same ratio between Department A and B. There is no reapportionment to stores as they don't use the maintenance department. The final step is to add up the columns for Departments A and B and to double check that this comes to the original total overheads figure of £20,400. By this stage, we have taken all the overheads of the company and shared them out between the production departments on a fair and equitable basis. The final stage would be to absorb these into the cost of one unit of product using an appropriate basis, but this is covered later in your studies. I hope this video has helped clarify the key techniques used, and thank you for watching.